This is one of my favorite historical revenge stories because its impacts are still felt today. Dante Alighieri was an Italian man during the late 12th century, and the best way I can describe him is that bro was the biggest hater. He was preying on the downfall of pretty much just everyone he didn't like. And nothing shows that better than his most popular book. But before that, a little context. When I call him Italian, that's just because he was born in modern-day Italy, in Florence. Florence during that time was its own city-state in a political war between two parties that were called the, Guelphs and Ghibellines. I hope I said that right. Perfect pronunciation, as always. And as one does, those parties were arguing over who should be in charge. Dante was involved on the side of the Guelphs, and when they won, they decided to split into two. The White Party and the Black Party. Dante was on the side of the White Party, which basically meant that he didn't like the Pope as much. He wanted Florence to be more independent, so they had a little conflict, and the White Party then won, and kicked the Black Party out of Florence. In response, the Black Party just told the Pope, who then sent an army to occupy the city. Long story short, the Pope fined Dante, he refused to pay, and he was exiled from his home in Florence. That dude went through a lot, so while in exile, he wrote the Divine Comedy, which, to put it lightly, is the most petty work of fiction to ever be released to the public. He released this story where he was the main character and he was traveling through hell, and everyone he disliked was there and suffering, including the Pope, which, as you can imagine, was kind of an insane thing to write. Like, imagine writing an entire religious fanfiction in order to depict everyone you don't like burning in hell. And it becomes insanely popular, like lives on for centuries. It'd be like if you were watching a movie and the main character was the director, and he pauses the story to mention his ex-wife and how in this universe her life is terrible. It's completely unhinged. And it wasn't just the Pope that Dante had in hell. It was literally everyone he could possibly ever have disliked. The political party that was in charge of Florence, all in hell. The political party before them, also in hell. The guy who sold moldy bread to him that one time 4 years ago, also burning in hell. Dante was absolutely relentless in how much of a hater he was. I absolutely love that level of petty. Alright, next up. This one will be short and sweet because I've talked about him before in a previous video that you should watch, but some theory to recontextualize his insane actions. We are talking about the Emperor of Rome, Caligula. So the setup is that his legions nearly mutinied after being told to invade Britain. The legion had various reasons. Some say it was because nobody wanted to go to Britain, which is the most valid thing I've heard. Some others said that the seas were too rough, and according to legend, this is where Caligula had his revenge. So Caligula's response to his soldiers not wanting to go to Britain because of the sea was, naturally, to declare war on the sea. Yeah, you heard that right. He declared war on the giant body of water, and he told his soldiers to collect seashells as trophies. So, he was crazy, right? I mean, he also appointed a horse into his council. Bro's nuts. Well, yeah, probably, but also this may have been him dissing the people around him in, like, a smart way. Like the time he appointed a horse to the Roman council. Which sounds weird, but in reality, it was an amazing diss. He's basically saying that the council members' jobs could have been done by a horse. Absolute legend. So I mean, why not declare war on the ocean to humiliate your army by having them stab the water and pick up seashells? Humiliating them by wasting their time and saying, thank God we avoided humiliation, to rub salt in the wound. Caligula really knew how to use unorthodox methods to get revenge on people he didn't like, or who disobeyed him. If you think about his craziness as actually him being extremely petty with a bit of ironic humor thrown in there, he might be my new favorite emperor. Wait, I forgot about all the other stuff he did. Alright, next up, Mael Brigte. He was a Scottish man during what is assumed to be the 9th century. And this dude was a nobody. I mean, that's because the most notable thing historically about him was his death. Yeah, he died battling a Viking named Sigurd the Mighty. To put that into perspective, Mael was called Mael the Bucktooth. This dude had the worst aura in history. I can't think of anyone else who's this unlucky. So, how'd he die specifically? Well, Sigurd and Mael agreed to a battle. Each side brings 40 men. And it was all going well and it was all set up. Then Mael noticed something. Sigurd's men were all on horses. Sigurd had been raiding for a long time. Mael just assumed he was flexing his cavalry by having all 40 men of his arrive on horseback. But then, Mael noticed something else. Each horse had 2 guys on it. Sigurd had brought 80 men instead, and Mael was absolutely on the back foot. But bro kinda stepped up when he turned to his men and said, each one of us takes at least one before we can die. Which is badass, but not nearly good enough to make me look past your title being the Bucktooth. Sigurd, of course, easily won the fight, and proceeded to behead Mael. So what does this story have to do with revenge? Well, Sigurd wore his enemies' heads as trophies, that was a thing he did, and Mael's Bucktooth scratched Sigurd's leg, causing it to become infected and killing him. This dude got revenge after dying, and it was all because of his goofy bucktooth. That's kinda awesome more that I think about it. Of all the ways to take revenge on someone after your death, that might be the dumbest. Next is Julie d'Aubigny, who seems determined to make me mispronounce her name. Her father was King Louis XIV, Master of Horse, and also a master swordsman who would teach fencing to the wealthy boys where he was employed. Julie would be included in those lessons where she would also learn to fence. She was very much an outlier for French women, especially pre-revolution. But after spending her early life learning to fence, among other things, she was well regarded for being an absurdly talented fighter. And she was also known to really get around. And if that doesn't display her talent enough, she was also an opera singer, which is where one of her many revenge stories takes place. So, one of her operatic co-stars, a tenor, was being a bit of a nuisance to the girls in the opera, and Julie would usually step in and defend the girls from the harassment to the annoyance of the tenor. One particular night, the tenor insulted Julie bad enough to cause her to demand a duel right then and there. The tenor was flustered and started coping like, "Nah, I'm not gonna duel a girl. I'd win and it would make me look bad if I hurt you." Very honorable, and yeah, he was saying that kind of stuff. Eventually, the other co-stars stepped in to stop Julie from beating the tenor. But as the night went on and everyone went home, Julie followed the tenor through the streets, eventually cornering him and demanding another duel. Again, he denied, and so Julie just beat the piss out of him and ran his pockets. And the next night at the opera, the tenor was reciting how he was mugged by a group of masked men and that they stole his possessions. To which Julie then interrupted his story by giving him his belongings back, humiliating him as it was revealed to everyone that he was lying. I just love that she didn't need to say anything there, just handed the stuff and walk away. That's truly a class act. Definitely one of my favorite revenge stories. Alright, next up we got Ned Kelly. So Ned Kelly was an Australian bushranger, which is essentially an Australian version of a cowboy, during the latter half of the 1800s. His family was struggling when he was a kid, and the police in the area were either unhelpful or spiteful and corrupt. Due to this, Ned's family was trapped in a cycle of committing crimes to get by, getting caught and fined, being unable to pay the fine because if they had money they wouldn't be resorting to crime to get by, and then getting arrested because they couldn't pay the fine. And the cycle would repeat itself. Ned was not in a good situation, and he would frequently get into fights. One night while he was drunk, the police came to arrest him for disorderly conduct. The next day when he was being escorted to court, a fight broke out between him and 4 other guards. One of the guards, named Tom Lonigan, grabbed and squeezed Ned's family jewels in order to pacify him, which is just not a cool move in a fight. To the bewilderment of the other officers, Ned, who you can presume was not happy about that, was allegedly quoted as saying, "If ever I were to shoot a man, it'd be you," to Lonigan. And then a year later, Ned was on the run from the cops due to a whole debacle involved getting into a fight and possibly shooting one of the officers who would harass his family. Blah blah blah, stuff like that. Long story short, Ned was now on the run from the cops a year later. Tom Lonigan and 3 other officers went tracking for Ned. Eventually, 2 officers went to scout, while Lonigan and the other officer by the name of Thomas McIntyre set up camp. And while they were working, Ned and his gang ambushed them. Holding them at gunpoint, they asked what they were doing out there. McIntyre kept his hands in the air and went on record saying that Lonigan reached for his gun and dove into cover. And when he peeked out to shoot at Ned, Ned shot him first, killing him. He followed through on his promise. The lesson being, don't squeeze a man's balls and try to shoot him when you're outnumbered. Like, that fact is not disputed. The official record by Thomas McIntyre is that Tom Lonigan reached for his gun and took cover, then peeked out and got shot. What was his plan? Was he stupid? I don't know. But while this was only the beginning for Ned Kelly's, it's the end of this video, so click this video here that YouTube thinks you'll like, or subscribe. See ya.